They sent the ugly daughter as a joke, but the joke was on them. Because the woman they threw away was the one person who knew all their secrets, and she was about to burn their entire world to the ground. Cruel laughter bounces off the high ceilings of the Adabio family dining room, sharp and clear as the crystal glasses they're drinking from. At the head of the long mahogany table, Naomi Adabio, the family matriarch, gestures with a flick of her wrist toward her eldest daughter, Odora. Odora is silently refilling water pitchers, her face a blank mask, her movements quiet and efficient. She's learned to make herself as small as possible in this house, to be invisible. At least she's useful for something, Naomi says, her voice dripping with the casual cruelty she reserves for her firstborn. Though I shudder to think what we'll do with her permanently, such a burden. Her other daughters, Grace and Clara, titter behind their embroidered napkins. They are younger, prettier versions of their mother, all sharp cheekbones and social graces. They look at Odora the way one might look at a piece of furniture that has grown old and unfashionable. An unfortunate, unmovable object. They see a plain face, a sturdy frame, a quiet demeanor. They see a failure. What they don't see, what they've never bothered to see, is the mind working behind Odora's calm, dark eyes. A mind that moves like lightning through columns of numbers, that sees patterns in chaos, that understands the intricate, brutal language of money. While they giggle about dresses and parties, Odora is the only thing standing between the Adabio name and total financial ruin. They have no idea. They think their wealth is a birthright, as natural and constant as the Mississippi sun. They have no clue that their grand estate is a house of cards, and Odora is the only one holding it up. Later that night, long after the laughter has faded and the family's asleep, Odora slips into her father's study. The room smells of old leather and cigar smoke. She lights a single oil lamp, the flame pushing back the shadows just enough. She spreads the family's financial ledgers across the massive oak desk. To anyone else, they are just rows of inscrutable figures. To Odora, they are a story, a very disturbing story. The numbers don't lie. The cotton investments, which her father boasted about for years, have collapsed, utterly failed. The business partnerships that funded their lavish lifestyle are dissolving one by one. The Adabios are drowning in a sea of red ink. They are bankrupt in all but name. For months, Odora has been waging a secret war on their behalf. She spends her nights hunched over these books, a financial ghost in her own home. She has renegotiated payment terms with angry creditors, her letters precise and persuasive. She has identified which assets could be sold off quietly, without raising alarm in their social circles. She has found obscure legal loopholes that have bought them precious weeks, precious months. And through it all, she has found something else, something much darker. As she untangled the knots of their legitimate debts, she started to see other threads, strange payments to companies that don't seem to exist, land deals that closed with impossible speed and even more impossible profits, money flowing through accounts her father never mentioned, accounts that exist only in the shadows. It's a pattern of deception, of fraud, of crime. Her brilliant mathematical mind, the one thing she inherited from her father, has detected a rot at the core of their remaining income. And she has been documenting every single transaction, every suspicious entry, in a small secret ledger of her own. She senses with a certainty that chills her to the bone that these secrets are the only thing keeping her family afloat. Illegality is their last remaining asset. Her family, of course, remains blissfully, willfully ignorant. They see her as their servant, their spinster, their shame. They have no idea she is also their unwilling savior and the secret keeper of their damnation. A few days later, the morning mail brings a letter that will change everything. It's from a man hundreds of miles west in Texas, a rancher named Lee Montgomery. The envelope is plain, the handwriting strong and clear. He is looking for a wife, but his request is unusual. He doesn't ask for beauty or social standing or a prestigious family name. He writes that he is a simple man building a life from scratch. He needs a partner. He specifically asks for a woman with practical skills, a strong character, and a good head for business. Naomi reads the letter aloud to Grace and Clara at the breakfast table, her voice thick with mockery. Odora stands by the sideboard, silent as a statue. "Ahead for business!" Clara shrieks with laughter, nearly spilling her tea. The poor man has no idea what he's truly asking for. "It would serve him right for being so presumptuous," Grace adds, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "Imagine, a common rancher thinking he could propose to an Adabio." Naomi's lips curl into a cold, cruel smile. It's the smile she gets when she's devised a particularly vicious social punishment. "Indeed," she says slowly, her eyes drifting over to where Adora stands. "Let him discover what he gets for making such ridiculous requests." The air grows thick with unspoken malice. Grace and Clara catch their mother's meaning instantly. Their eyes glitter with wicked delight. "We'll send our dear Odora," Naomi announces, the words falling like chips of ice, "as his practical bride." The humiliation is a physical blow. Odora feels the heat rise in her cheeks, a flush of shame that burns from her neck to her forehead. Her sister's giggles are like needles in her ears. They see it as the ultimate prank, sending the ugly, unwanted daughter to some backwater rancher who values practicality. It's a perfect, poetic cruelty. But beneath the sting of their scorn, a different feeling stirs in Odora's chest. A tiny, fragile flicker of something she hasn't felt in years. Hope. This man, this stranger, he doesn't want a society belle. He doesn't care about pretty faces or charming conversation. He wants skills. He values character. For the first time in her life, someone is asking for the very things she possesses in abundance, the things her family has always dismissed as worthless. Perhaps, perhaps this man might actually see her, truly see her. "I'll go," Odora says. Her voice is quiet, but it cuts through their laughter and silences the room. Her family stares at her, their amused expressions frozen in place. They had expected a scene. They had hoped for tears, for pleading, for a satisfying display of despair. Her calm, immediate acceptance throws them completely off balance. It robs them of their victory. Naomi recovers first, her smile tightening. "Wonderful," she says, her tone brittle. "We'll arrange your passage immediately. The sooner the better." They want her gone. They can't wait to be rid of their greatest embarrassment. But as Odora turns to leave the room, she allows herself a small, secret thought. They think they are getting rid of a problem. They have no idea they are about to unleash one. In the week before her departure, Odora prepares for her new life, while her mother and sisters arrange the cheapest, most uncomfortable passage they can find. Odora packs. She has few personal belongings of value. A couple of simple dresses, a well-worn book of poetry, a locket with a faded picture of the father who had, in his better moments, appreciated her mind. But her most important possession, the thing she guards with her life, is packed first. It's a heavy leather satchel. Inside, nestled among her spare clothes, are her secret ledgers. Years of meticulous documentation. Every false entry, every ghost company, every questionable land deal. The evidence of her family's darkest financial secrets. The proof that could utterly destroy them and their network of corrupt partners. She has been compiling it for years, driven by a premonition that she might one day need a weapon, a shield, or a way out. Her family is sending her away to be forgotten. They are exiling her, but they are making a terrible mistake. They are not just sending their daughter. They are sending their judge, jury, and executioner, and she's taking all the evidence with her. The stagecoach journey west is as brutal as her family had intended. The dust is relentless, coating everything in a fine layer of grit. The carriage jolts over rutted roads, throwing passengers against each other. But the physical discomfort is nothing compared to the social humiliation. Word has spread, carried on the winds of gossip that travel faster than any horse. The story of the Adabio family's cruel joke has become a source of public entertainment. Fellow passengers whisper and stare. They point when they think she isn't looking. They see a woman rejected by her own kin, and they find it amusing. They expect her to be bitter, cold, and withdrawn. Then 3 days into the journey, a young woman traveling alone with her infant child falls ill. A fever sets in, hot and fast. The other passengers pull away, afraid of catching the sickness. They offer no help, only fearful glances. Odora does not hesitate. She moves to the woman's side, her practical nature taking over. She shares her own meager supply of medicine and her precious water. She tears strips from her own petticoat to make cool cloths for the woman's burning forehead. She rocks the crying baby, humming a soft tune until he quiets. She sits with them through the night, never sleeping, offering quiet comfort and steady care. The other passengers watch in stunned silence. This is not the woman they expected. They saw the family's reject. They witnessed instead a quiet, profound compassion. By the time the stagecoach finally rumbles into the dusty outpost of Silver Creek, the whispers have changed. The stares are no longer filled with mockery, but with a grudging respect. Odora steps down from the coach as the sun bleeds across the horizon, painting the rolling hills in shades of orange and purple. Silver Creek Ranch is vast, but it carries the weary look of a long, hard struggle. Fences sag. A barn door hangs on a single hinge. The main house needs a coat of paint. Everything is functional, but held together by willpower and wire. A man emerges from the house, wiping his hands on a rag. He is tall and lean, his face weathered by sun and wind, etched with lines of worry that are temporarily erased by a pair of surprisingly kind eyes. His hands are calloused, his clothes simple and worn. This is Lee Montgomery. He looks nothing like the polished, soft-handed gentleman her sisters fawned over. He looks like he belongs to the land, and the land belongs to him. He greets her with a simple nod, his gaze direct and assessing. There is no pity in his eyes, only a quiet curiosity. "You must be Miss Adabio," he says, his voice a low baritone. "I am," she replies, her own voice steady, betraying none of the exhaustion from the journey. "Welcome to Silver Creek," he says. "It's not much, but it's honest work." The tour of the ranch is brief. He doesn't try to hide the ranch's struggles. He points out the fields that need irrigation, the herd that needs to grow, the mountain of paperwork in his office that he can't seem to conquer. "I'm a rancher, not a bookkeeper," he admits with a wry, self-deprecating smile. "My father used to say a man can't be good at everything." He leads her into the small, cluttered office. Papers are piled on every surface. Bills, receipts, and contracts create a landscape of financial chaos. "My last letter," he says, gesturing to the mess, "mentioned needing someone with practical skills. This is the heart of the problem." He seems almost apologetic, skeptical that this woman, sent from a wealthy Southern family, could possibly make sense of it all. Odora says nothing. She simply takes off her dusty traveling cloak, rolls up her sleeves, and picks up the first stack of papers. Her mind, starved for order and purpose, springs to life. The numbers, the dates, the terms, they speak to her, and they tell her a story of a good man being slowly bled dry by inefficiency and bad deals. Within a single hour, she has identified three major, crippling problems. He's paying wildly inflated prices for basic supplies from a merchant in the next town. He's consistently missing payment deadlines on his loans, triggering expensive penalty fees that are eating into his profits. And he's undercharging for his cattle, completely unaware of the current market rates just one territory over. He's working himself to the bone, but losing money with every transaction. She stacks the papers into neat, organized piles. Problems in one stack, solutions in another. She writes out a simple, clear list of actions he needs to take. Change suppliers, restructure the loan payments, demand the proper market rate for his livestock. She pushes the list across the desk to him. "With these adjustments," she says, her voice clear and confident, "you could increase your profits by at least 30% within 3 months." Lee stares at her. Then he stares at the organized stacks of paper, everything labeled and explained in her precise, elegant handwriting. He looks at the list of solutions, so simple and yet so brilliant. He slowly picks up the list, his calloused fingers tracing her words. A long silence hangs in the small office. "Your family," he says finally, his voice slow and filled with a dawning wonder. "They said you were unmarriageable." Odora meets his gaze, her chin held high. "They did," she says. And then, for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, a genuine, unforced smile touches her lips. They were wrong. In that moment, something shifts between them. This weathered rancher, this stranger from a world away, sees her. He doesn't see an ugly daughter or a social burden. He sees a sharp mind, a capable partner, a hidden strength. He sees the person her family refused to acknowledge. Lee Montgomery had written a letter asking for practical skills and strong character. He was about to discover he had received so much more. He had found both, wrapped in the quiet courage of the woman his neighbors had sent as their cruelest joke. What neither of them could possibly know was that Odora's hidden knowledge, locked away in her leather satchel, would soon make her the most valuable and the most dangerous woman in 3 territories. The family's malicious prank was about to detonate, and the consequences would be more explosive than anyone could ever have imagined. In less than 3 days, Odora transforms the chaos of Lee's ranch office into a fortress of efficiency. It's a sight to behold. Every bill is now categorized, filed by priority and due date. Every contract has been reviewed, its fine print dissected, and in several cases, already renegotiated with a firm but polite letter. Every single expense, down to the last nail and bag of feed, is tracked and analyzed for potential savings. She moves with a quiet, relentless energy that leaves Lee in a state of constant, low-grade amazement. He watches her work in the evenings, the lamplight catching the intense focus in her eyes. Her fingers fly across the ledger pages with the grace and precision of a master musician. The numbers are her instrument, and she is playing a symphony of solvency. She finds mathematical errors buried in years-old account books, errors that had been silently costing him hundreds of dollars a year. She uncovers suppliers who had been systematically overcharging him for decades, padding their invoices with fees he never noticed. She creates a budget, a real one, that shows him exactly where his money is going and where it needs to go. One evening, as she finishes reconciling his accounts for the quarter, he leans against the doorframe, a cup of coffee in his hand. "How did you learn all this?" he asks, his voice filled with genuine awe. "It's like you were born knowing it." Odora looks up from the ledger, a faint, bittersweet smile on her face. "My father's business was complex," she explains. "He dealt in cotton, shipping, land speculation. I started helping him with simple calculations when I was 12. By the time I was 16, I was managing most of his financial operations." Lee's eyebrows shoot up. 16? And your family? They never valued this? Her smile turns bitter. Oh, they valued the results, the money, the lifestyle it provided. They just never valued the person who achieved them. To them, it was unladylike, a parlor trick, an unfortunate hobby. Lee studies her face in the warm glow of the lamp. She is not like the society beauties he's occasionally seen at cattle auctions in the bigger cities. Her features are strong, not delicate. Her hands, though skilled with a pen, show the calluses of real work, mending, cooking, gardening. But it's her eyes that captivate him. They hold an intelligence so deep and sharp it seems to see right through things, right through him. "Well," he says softly, pushing himself off the doorframe and walking toward her. "Their loss is my gain." The quiet sincerity in his voice makes her heart do a strange little flip. No one has ever spoken to her like that. No one has ever looked at her like that. Word of the new Mrs. Montgomery spreads through Silver Creek like a prairie fire. The story of the Adabio family's joke had arrived before she did, and the community had been prepared to pity or mock her. Instead, they are confronted with a woman of quiet competence and unshakable dignity. When Lee takes her into town for supplies, the whispers follow them. But Lee puts a stop to it, quickly and decisively. At the general store, when the owner, Mr. Henderson, makes a poorly veiled joke about her southern origins, Lee's friendly demeanor vanishes. He places his items on the counter and fixes Henderson with a hard stare. "My wife," he says, his voice low and firm, "has done more to improve my ranch in 2 weeks than most men could manage in a year. Her mind is the sharpest I've ever known. Anyone who disrespects her, disrespects me. Are we clear?" The store falls into a dead silence. Mr. Henderson, a man not easily intimidated, suddenly finds the floorboards fascinating. "Crystal clear, Lee," he mutters. The message is sent. Lee Montgomery stands by his wife. And in a small community like Silver Creek, a man's public support carries enormous weight. But the real test, the one that will change the course of their lives, arrives on the back of an expensive, gleaming black stallion. His name is Marcus Whitfield, and he is everything Lee Montgomery is not. He is polished, wealthy, and slick as a snake in oil. He owns the largest ranching operation in 3 counties, a vast empire built on aggressive, often ruthless, business tactics. His clothes are tailored, his boots are spotless even after a long ride, and his smile never ever reaches his cold, calculating eyes. "Montgomery," he booms, dismounting with practiced ease. "I hear congratulations are in order." He gives Lee a hearty slap on the back that is more about asserting dominance than offering friendship. "Thank you kindly, Whitfield," Lee replies, his posture stiffening slightly. Whitfield's gaze sweeps over Eudora, lingering for a moment before dismissing her entirely. It's a look she knows well, a look that says, "You are nothing." "I also hear," Whitfield continues, turning his attention back to Lee, "that you've been having some financial difficulties. Lucky for you, I've always had a soft spot for my neighbors. I'm prepared to make you a generous offer." He pulls a folded contract from his saddlebags with a theatrical flourish. "I'll buy this ranch, $20,000, cash, payment within the week. It's more than fair, given the circumstances." Lee frowns. The offer is low, insultingly low. "The ranch is worth at least $30,000, and you know it." Whitfield shrugs, his smile unwavering. "In good times, perhaps. But these aren't good times, are they? Cattle prices are falling. Railroad costs are rising. A man could get wiped out. My offer takes you out clean, with cash in your pocket." Eudora has been standing silently on the porch, listening, but now she steps forward. Her movement is so unexpected it draws both men's attention. "May I see the contract, Mr. Whitfield?" she asks, her voice even and calm. Whitfield's eyebrows raise in genuine surprise, followed by a flicker of annoyance. "This is business between men, Mrs. Montgomery," he says, his tone patronizing. But Lee steps to her side, a solid, unmovable presence. "My wife handles our business affairs," Lee states firmly, leaving no room for argument. Whitfield's smile tightens at the edges, but he reluctantly hands over the papers. Eudora takes the contract, her eyes scanning the document with a speed and comprehension that unnerves him. Her trained eye, honed by years of deciphering her father's deceptive paperwork, immediately catches the details others would miss, the traps hidden in the legal jargon. "This contract," she says, looking up, her gaze steady and direct, "requires the payment of all outstanding debts before the transfer of ownership." "Standard procedure," Whitfield says dismissively. "Indeed," Eudora agrees, "but you've listed debts here that don't exist. According to these figures, Mr. Montgomery owes nearly $15,000 in various fees and penalties to creditors I've never heard of." Whitfield's condescending demeanor begins to crack. "Those are legitimate charges." "To whom?" Eudora presses. "I have reviewed every single one of our accounts. These names, these companies, they do not appear in any of our records, anywhere." The air on the porch grows thick with tension. Whitfield's smile is gone now, replaced by a thin, hard line. "Perhaps your record-keeping isn't as thorough as you believe," he says, his voice laced with a threat. Eudora doesn't flinch. "Or perhaps," she counters, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "your contract isn't as honest as you claim." The challenge hangs in the air, sharp and dangerous. Marcus Whitfield is not a man accustomed to being questioned, let alone exposed, especially not by a woman, and certainly not by the plain, unassuming wife of a struggling rancher. He snatches the contract from her hand. "I'll give you time to reconsider," he snarls, his mask of civility completely gone. "But my offer won't stand indefinitely." He mounts his horse and rides away, leaving a cloud of dust and palpable menace in his wake. After he's gone, Lee turns to Eudora, his face a mixture of anger and confusion. 15,000 in fake debts. How did he think he'd get away with that? Eudora looks at him, and her expression is grim. Because he has gotten away with it before. Many times. She walks back into the house, Lee following close behind. "How can you be so sure?" he asks. She stops in the center of the living room and turns to face him. "Because I've seen this exact scheme before," she says, her voice low and serious. The use of fake creditors, the manufactured debts, the pressure to force a quick sale, these are the same tactics my father and his partners used in Mississippi. Lee stares at her, the implications of her words slowly sinking in. Each one a hammer blow. This isn't just a local bully trying to steal their land. This is something bigger, something organized. You're saying this is a network? He asks, his voice barely a whisper. Odora nods, her eyes dark with the weight of her knowledge. I'm saying Marcus Whitfield is part of a criminal enterprise, a very successful one. Then she delivers the final devastating blow. And in that satchel I brought with me from home, I have the evidence that could destroy them all. The revelation settles between them, heavy and terrifying. Odora wasn't just a brilliant bookkeeper sent west as a cruel joke. She was a witness, a woman who had unknowingly stumbled out of one criminal conspiracy and straight into the heart of another. Her family thought they were exiling her. They had no idea they had just armed their greatest enemy and pointed her at their own kind. Lee reaches across the small space between them and takes her hand. His grip is firm, steadying. What do we do? He asks. Odora's gaze is unwavering, her mind already calculating, planning, preparing for the war that has just been declared. We gather more evidence, she says. We protect ourselves. And when the time is right, we make sure that justice is finally served. Outside, storm clouds gather on the horizon, mirroring the tempest that is about to break over Silver Creek. But inside the small ranch house, two people have forged a partnership built on a foundation stronger than stone. Truth, respect, and a shared, dangerous purpose. The family's cruel joke was no longer a joke. It was about to become their worst nightmare, and Marcus Whitfield's too. Odora unbuckles the straps on her heavy leather satchel and upends it onto Lee's kitchen table. The contents spill out, a river of paper that covers the worn wood. 3 years of secrets, 3 years of meticulous, dangerous documentation. Bank records, forged contracts, coded correspondence, secret ledgers written in her own precise hand. It is the complete anatomy of a criminal empire. Lee looks at the mountain of evidence, his eyes wide. I started collecting this when I first noticed the discrepancies in my father's accounts, she explains, her voice low as she sorts the documents into organized piles. Payments to companies that didn't exist on any registry. Land transfers that were registered in the middle of the night. Money vanishing from accounts, only to reappear in the name of a business partner overseas. It was a shell game, played with people's livelihoods. Lee picks up a contract dated 2 years prior. It details the forced sale of a small farm in Mississippi. The signature at the bottom, the one buying the property for pennies on the dollar, belongs to a name he now recognizes with a jolt of ice in his veins. Marcus Whitfield. He was operating in Mississippi too, Lee says, his voice grim. Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and now Texas, Odora confirms, her finger tracing a line on a map she's unrolled. The pattern is always the same. They target struggling landowners, farmers in debt, ranchers hit by drought. Then they use men like Whitfield to create fake debts, file fraudulent liens, and intimidate them into a quick sale. Once they have the land, they resell it to the railroad companies for triple the price, sometimes more. The sheer scope of the conspiracy is staggering. It's not just a few isolated incidents. It's a systematic plague rolling across the country. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of families have lost their homes, their land, their entire futures. Entire communities have been hollowed out, all so that men like her father, men like Whitfield, could profit from manufactured misery. We need to warn our neighbors, Lee says, his hands clenching into fists. We need to show them this. But their first attempt to share what they know is met with a swift, chilling response. The day after Whitfield's visit, two hard-faced men ride up to their ranch. They don't dismount. They just sit on their horses, their hands resting near the guns on their hips. They are not here for a social call. Montgomery, the first man says, his eyes like chips of flint. We understand your wife has been asking questions about local property transactions. I've been managing my husband's accounts, Odora replies, stepping onto the porch to stand beside Lee. Her voice is calm, but her heart is hammering against her ribs. The second man spits a stream of tobacco juice near her feet. "We suggest you limit your management to domestic affairs," he snarls. "Some questions are dangerous for a woman to ask. Dangerous for her husband, too." Lee steps forward, his body shielding Odora's. "Are you threatening my family?" he demands, his voice a low growl. The first man gives a cold smile. "We're offering friendly advice. Accept Mr. Whitfield's generous offer. Leave Texas. Find somewhere quieter to settle down before things get loud." They wheel their horses around and gallop away, leaving a silent, potent threat hanging in the air. The visit, meant to intimidate them into silence, has the opposite effect. It fuels Odora's resolve. Disregarding the danger, she begins her own quiet investigation of Silver Creek. She starts by making social calls to the other ranchers' wives, a basket of fresh-baked bread or a jar of preserves in hand. It's a role they expect her to play, and she uses it as a cover. While she talks about recipes and weather, she listens. And what she hears confirms her worst fears. It's the same pattern, repeated over and over. The Henderson family, whose land borders theirs to the east, suddenly received an unexpected tax bill for $3,000, a sum they couldn't possibly pay. The Pattersons to the south are being sued by a creditor from another state, a company they've never heard of, over a loan they never took out. And the Williams family, a young couple with 3 small children, found half their cattle dead one morning, mysteriously poisoned. They're now on the verge of bankruptcy. And for every family facing their own unique, manufactured crisis, there is only one solution offered: sell their land to Marcus Whitfield at a fraction of its true value. "It's brilliant in its own evil way," Odora tells Lee that evening, her face pale with anger as she maps out the connections on a piece of parchment. "They create the crisis, tailor-made for each family. Then they offer the only escape route. Most people are too desperate or too scared to fight back. They just take the offer and disappear." "But you're not most people," Lee says, his hand covering hers on the table. "No," she agrees, her gaze hardening. "I'm not." Her investigation, quiet and methodical, begins to unravel the full scope of Whitfield's local network. It's not just a few hired thugs. The corruption runs deep, infecting the entire town. She discovers that Judge Crawford, the local magistrate, signs fraudulent court orders and property liens without ever reading them, in exchange for a healthy monthly stipend. Sheriff Barnes, the man sworn to protect the community, refuses to investigate any suspicious crimes, like poisoned cattle, and is known to intimidate anyone who speaks out against Whitfield. And Mr. Morrison, the town banker, creates the false loan documents on demand, forging signatures and fabricating records. The conspiracy reaches into every corner of local government and business. Whitfield isn't just stealing land, he is stealing justice. He is stealing democracy itself. The biggest breakthrough comes when Odora, cross-referencing land sale records with railroad expansion plans she requested from a federal office, discovers the final piece of the puzzle. Every single property Whitfield acquires, without exception, is immediately resold to the Continental Railroad Company at a massive profit. The railroad has a planned route for their new western expansion, a route that goes directly through Silver Creek County. They need the land, and they don't care how their local acquisition agent gets it, as long as the titles are legally clean by the time they reach them. He's not just a local criminal, Odora realizes, a chill running down her spine. He's the advance man for a corporate takeover. They aren't just buying a few ranches, they're clearing an entire county for railroad development, and they're using him to do their dirty work. As their investigation deepens, the personal cost becomes terrifyingly clear. The anonymous threats escalate. It's no longer just veiled warnings. A note is slipped under their door in the dead of night, written in crude letters: "Stop digging." A message is left on a fence post, a dead snake coiled around it. "Next time, it will be you." One evening, as Lee rides home from town, a rifle shot cracks from the hills, the bullet whistling past his ear. They are being hunted. But the most shocking discovery, the one that elevates the conspiracy from a regional crime to a federal one, comes from a dusty old land grant map she finds in the county records office. Comparing it to Whitfield's acquisition records, she finds a massive discrepancy. A huge tract of land, over 50,000 acres, that Whitfield now claims, was never privately owned to begin with. It was designated as federal territory, protected land belonging to the United States government. He didn't just forge documents to steal from private citizens. He forged federal documents, bribed federal land agents, and stole land directly from the American people. This isn't just fraud, Odora says, her voice filled with a stunned amazement as she shows Lee the maps. This is theft from the United States government itself. We're talking about major federal crimes, crimes that carry sentences of decades in prison. The evidence is now overwhelming, a mountain of proof that could bring down not just Whitfield, but corrupt officials all the way to the territorial capital. But it's also lethally dangerous. Every document she possesses, every name in her ledger, implicates powerful, ruthless men who have already proven they are willing to use violence and intimidation to protect their empire. That night, Lee finds her working late by the fire, the original documents spread around her. She is painstakingly copying the most important records in her precise handwriting. "What are you doing?" he asks softly. "Making backup copies," she replies without looking up. "If something happens to the originals, if there's a fire, we need proof of what we've discovered." Lee looks at her, at the fierce determination on her face, and his heart aches with a mixture of pride and terror. "Nothing is going to happen to the originals," he says, trying to sound more confident than he feels. "Nothing is going to happen to us." Odora finally looks up from her work, her eyes meeting his in the flickering firelight. "My family thought they were untouchable too, Lee. They controlled judges and sheriffs and bankers. But corruption is like a disease. It always collapses under its own weight, eventually. The only question is whether we'll be around to see justice served." As she speaks, Lee glances out the window into the deep darkness. He sees them. 2, maybe 3 riders, circling the property at a distance, just faint silhouettes against the moonless sky. They are prisoners in their own home. The pressure is building, squeezing them from all sides, pushing them toward an inevitable, violent confrontation. Odora had been sent west as her family's cruelest joke. Now she held the evidence that could destroy not just Whitfield's criminal empire, but the very same corrupt network that had cast her out in the first place. The woman everyone had dismissed as worthless had become the most dangerous person in 3 territories. And soon, very soon, everyone was going to discover exactly how wrong they had been about Odora Montgomery. Odora turns the spare bedroom into a war room. The walls once bare are now covered in evidence. She arranges every document, every testimony, every piece of the puzzle by date and significance, creating a devastating visual narrative of the crime. Maps cover one entire wall, showing the illegal property transfers across 4 states, with red yarn connecting the stolen lands to Whitfield and his railroad contacts. Financial records, the lifeblood of her case, fill 3 large wooden crates stacked in the corner. Sworn witness testimonies, which she and Lee have been carefully and secretly collecting, occupy the entire surface of a small desk. Her documentation is no longer just a collection of facts. It's an indictment. It proves beyond any doubt a criminal enterprise spanning 15 years. Whitfield's network has stolen over 200,000 acres of land. They have displaced more than 60 families, shattering lives and communities. And the illegal profits, laundered through a dozen shell companies, exceed $500,000, a staggering fortune. Lee, recognizing the power of a simple story, helps her create presentations that even the illiterate ranchers in the community can understand. They use colored string on the maps to trace the flow of money from the victims, through the corrupt officials, and ultimately into the pockets of Whitfield and the Continental Railroad. They make simple, hand-drawn charts that show the fake debts appearing just before a family is forced to sell. They prepare a detailed timeline of the crimes, dating all the way back to the end of the Civil War, showing how the conspiracy grew and evolved. "This is more thorough than most federal investigations I've ever heard of," Lee observes one night, looking around the room in awe. "It looks less like a bedroom and more like the headquarters of a prosecuting attorney." "It has to be," Odora replies, her eyes tired but her voice firm. "When you accuse powerful men, your proof cannot have a single crack. It must be a fortress of facts." The most difficult part of their preparation is convincing the victims to testify publicly. The fear in the community is a palpable thing. Most families are terrified of retaliation. They've seen what happened to the few neighbors who tried to refuse Whitfield's initial offers. Mysterious accidents on the trail. Barns catching fire in the middle of the night from a stray spark. Men who asked too many questions in town suddenly disappearing. Their families told they'd simply packed up and moved on. The message was clear. Defiance was a death sentence. So Odora spends weeks earning their trust, one family at a time. She and Lee ride out to their homesteads not as accusers, but as allies. She doesn't lead with the evidence. She leads with her own story. She tells them about her own family's betrayal, about being exiled and dismissed. She connects with them not as a brilliant investigator, but as a fellow victim of a cruel and unjust world. Then, and only then, does she lay out the proof. She shows them the forged signatures, the fraudulent tax bills, the irrefutable mathematical proof that their personal tragedies were not random misfortunes, but calculated acts of a criminal conspiracy. Slowly, painstakingly, courage begins to replace fear. The Henderson family, seeing the forged signature of the tax assessor on their bill, agrees to testify. Martha Patterson, when Odora shows her that the signature on her family's fake loan document doesn't match her husband's handwriting on their marriage certificate, breaks down in tears and then rises with a steely resolve. James Williams, holding the sample of poison grain Odora had helped him identify, agrees to tell the world how someone tried to systematically destroy his livelihood. Each story adds another brick to Odora's fortress of facts. People are starting to believe, Lee says after their 20th witness agrees to cooperate. They're starting to believe we can actually win this. Believing isn't enough, Odora says. We need absolute, undeniable proof. The kind of proof that even a corrupt judge can't dismiss. Her final explosive piece of evidence comes from the most unlikely of sources. A young, disgruntled bookkeeper from the Silver Creek Bank, terrified that he will eventually be blamed for the bank's fraudulent activities, secretly contacts them. He has seen too much, and his conscience can no longer bear it. In exchange for a guarantee of protection and immunity, he provides them with copies of Whitfield's personal account ledgers. The ledgers are the smoking gun. They contain detailed, itemized records of every bribe paid to every corrupt official. $200 a month for Judge Crawford, $150 for Sheriff Barnes, with bonuses for handling specific troublemakers. $300 for Banker Morrison every time he created a new set of false loan documents. It's all there, in black and white. More importantly, the ledgers reveal the true, breathtaking scope of the railroad conspiracy. There are entries detailing payments from Continental Railroad to Whitfield, totaling over $200,000, labeled as land acquisition and facilitation fees, and alongside the payments are copies of correspondence, letters between Whitfield and railroad executives in Washington, D.C., discussing the need for creative acquisition methods and clearing local obstacles to their western expansion. This implicates people in Washington, Odora says, her voice trembling slightly as she reads the letters. This goes all the way to the top. They now have a case that could not only free Silver Creek, but could potentially expose corruption at the highest levels of corporate and territorial power. But the evidence is a fire in their hands. The more powerful their case becomes, the more danger they are in. They can't go to the local sheriff. They can't go to the local judge. They are surrounded by the very criminals they seek to expose. How can they possibly get this evidence into the right hands before Whitfield's network silences them for good? The answer comes to Lee in a flash of inspiration. The annual Silver Creek Harvest Festival is just 2 weeks away. It's the biggest event of the year. The entire county will be there. More importantly, it's a major political event. Government officials from the territorial capital always attend. Newspaper reporters will be there to cover the speeches. And this year, the keynote address will be delivered by a man whose name is a legend in the Western Territories, Territorial Judge William Harrison. Judge Harrison has a reputation forged in iron. He is known to be fiercely independent and utterly incorruptible. He has successfully prosecuted corrupt government officials in 3 different territories, earning the fear and respect of criminals and honest folk alike. He is famous for his thorough investigations and his harsh sentences for land fraud. a crime he considers to be a cancer on the frontier. If we can present our evidence to Judge Harrison in public, in front of the entire community and the newspapers, Odora says, the plan crystallizing in her mind, then Whitfield can't silence us. He can't make the evidence disappear. He can't stop the truth from coming out. It's a bold, incredibly risky plan. It means coming out of the shadows and confronting their enemy head on. She spends the next 2 weeks in a fever of preparation. Every document is organized, labeled, and cross-referenced. Every witness is coached on how to deliver their testimony clearly and concisely. Every chart and map is redesigned for maximum visual impact, to be understood from the back of a crowd. The plan requires the timing of a master watchmaker. Judge Harrison is scheduled to speak at 2 o'clock. Immediately following his address, there is a public forum for community concerns. That is her window. Odora will stand up and formally request permission to present evidence of federal crimes. Once she begins speaking, territorial law dictates that her testimony must be officially recorded as part of the public record. There will be no turning back. The night before the festival, Lee finds her in the war room, going over the presentation one last time. The weight of what they are about to do hangs heavy in the air. "Are you ready for this?" he asks quietly. Odora looks up from the maps, from the faces of the families whose fates rest on her shoulders. She thinks of her own family, of the casual cruelty that set her on this path. She thinks of their disdain, their laughter. "I've been ready since the day they sent me away," she says. Her voice is hard and clear as a diamond. They thought they were getting rid of a problem. Instead, they created their worst nightmare. Tomorrow, the woman they had all dismissed would stand before hundreds of people and prove that the truth was a more powerful weapon than money, influence, or intimidation. Tomorrow, the Harvest Festival would become a trial, and Marcus Whitfield's empire was about to burn. The Silver Creek Harvest Festival is a riot of color and sound under a cloudless autumn sky. Families have spread their blankets across the town square, their picnic baskets overflowing. The air is filled with the scent of fresh apple cider and roasted corn. Children, their faces sticky with sweets, chase each other between the food stalls, their laughter mixing with the sound of musicians tuning their fiddles on a wooden platform decorated with festive ribbons. It is a perfect picture of community, of peace and prosperity. It is a perfect lie. Odora arrives with Lee, and they look like any other ranch couple enjoying a day of celebration. She carries 2 heavy leather cases, the kind a lawyer might carry. Inside is 3 years of meticulously gathered evidence. She wears her finest dress, a simple but elegant blue cotton that had belonged to her grandmother. Lee walks beside her, his Sunday coat brushed and his boots polished, but his hand rests near the pistol tucked into his belt. They are not here for the festivities. They are here to start a war. They see Marcus Whitfield holding court near the speaker's platform, surrounded by his cronies, Sheriff Barnes, Judge Crawford, Banker Morrison. They are the kings of this county, laughing and accepting greetings from the townspeople, many of whom despise them but are too afraid to show it. Whitfield catches Odora's eye across the square. He gives her a slow, smug smile, a look of ultimate confidence. He believes he has won. He believes she and her husband have been properly intimidated. He has no idea he is looking at the woman who is about to orchestrate his ruin. At precisely 2 o'clock, a hush falls over the crowd as Territorial Judge William Harrison steps up to the podium. He is an imposing figure, with a shock of white hair and piercing blue eyes that seem to miss nothing. His reputation for unshakable honesty precedes him, and the crowd listens with genuine respect. His voice, deep and resonant, carries clearly across the square as he speaks about justice, progress, and the sacredness of the rule of law. Our great territory was built by the sweat and toil of honest men and women who worked hard for what they achieved, he declares, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. And we must always, always remain vigilant against those who would seek to corrupt our institutions and prey upon their neighbors for personal gain. As he speaks these words, Whitfield's smile flickers for just a fraction of a second. A few of his associates shift uncomfortably on their feet. When Judge Harrison finishes his address to a round of hearty applause, he opens the floor for community comments, a standard procedure at such events. It is the moment Odora has been waiting for. Her heart pounds in her chest, a frantic drum against her ribs, but she takes a slow, steadying breath. She stands up from her blanket. Her movement is quiet, but in the expectant hush of the crowd, it is dramatic. Every eye turns to her. "Your Honor," she calls out, her voice clear and strong, projecting across the square. "I request permission to present evidence of federal crimes that are actively affecting this community and this territory." A collective gasp ripples through the crowd. The square falls into a dead silence. This is not the usual sort of community comment. Judge Harrison looks down from the platform, his expression one of professional, intense interest. "State your name for the record, madam," he commands, "and the nature of these alleged crimes." "My name is Odora Montgomery," she announces, "and I have documented, verifiable evidence of systematic land fraud, theft of federal property, and bribery involving federal officials, railroad executives, and the local authorities of this very county." Whitfield's face goes a chalk white. He turns and whispers urgently to Sheriff Barnes, who immediately starts moving through the crowd, his intention clear: to stop her, to silence her. But he is too late. "You have the floor, Mrs. Montgomery," Judge Harrison says formally, his words a shield of law around her. "You may present your evidence." Odora opens her first leather case. With deliberate, steady movements, she withdraws a large map of Silver Creek County and holds it high for the entire crowd to see. "This map," she announces, her voice ringing with authority, "shows property ownership in this county according to the Federal Land Office records from 1862. These areas, which I have marked in red, belong to the United States government. They have never been legally sold or transferred to private ownership." She then produces a second map, this one showing current ownership claims. "And this map shows the same properties today. As you can see, they are now all claimed by Mr. Marcus Whitfield and his business associates. Over 50,000 acres of federal land have been illegally transferred into his name through the use of forged documents and fraudulent sales." Murmurs of shock and anger sweep through the crowd. People are on their feet, craning their necks to see the maps, the visual proof of the theft undeniable. Judge Harrison steps down from the platform, his face a grim mask, to examine the evidence more closely. But Odora is just getting started. "Furthermore," she continues, her voice rising, opening her second case, "I have financial records, bank ledgers, proving the systematic bribery of our local officials to facilitate and conceal these crimes." She holds up a ledger page, a damning artifact of corruption. "These records show monthly payments from Mr. Whitfield to Judge Crawford, totaling over $3,000 in the past year, for the purpose of signing fraudulent property liens. They show payments to Sheriff Barnes for obstructing justice and intimidating witnesses. And they show payments to banker Morrison for the creation of forged loan documents designed to bankrupt honest ranchers." This time, the murmurs are a roar of outrage. Sheriff Barnes freezes mid-stride, his face ashen. Judge Crawford and banker Morrison look like they might faint. Whitfield is screaming at Barnes to arrest her, but the sheriff is paralyzed, trapped between his paymaster's orders and the unblinking stare of a territorial judge. Then Odora does the most powerful thing of all. She lowers the documents and addresses the crowd directly. Her people. "How many of you," she asks, her voice filled with a powerful empathy, "have received mysterious tax bills you couldn't possibly pay? How many of you have been sued by creditors you never borrowed from? How many of you have lost your land, your homes, to manufacture debts you didn't understand?" Hands begin to go up. First a few, tentatively, then a dozen, then dozens more all across the square. The full, heartbreaking scope of Whitfield's reign of terror becomes visually undeniably apparent to everyone present. Samuel Henderson, a big quiet man, stands up from his family's blanket, his face streaked with tears of rage and relief. "She's telling the truth," he bellows. "She helped us prove our tax bill was a fraud. We owe nothing to anyone." Martha Patterson rises to her feet, her voice shaking but strong. "She showed us our loan documents were forged. My husband never signed those papers." James Williams joins them, holding up a small cloth bag. "She identified the poison that was used to kill our cattle. Someone was deliberately trying to sabotage our ranch and force us into bankruptcy. One by one, like a dam breaking, Whitfield's victims find their courage. They stand up and they speak their truth, their individual stories weaving together into an inescapable tapestry of crime and corruption that stretches back for more than a decade. Judge Harrison listens to it all, his face growing darker and angrier with each testimony. He studies the evidence Odora has laid out. The documentation is perfect. The financial trail is clear. The mathematical analysis is beyond dispute. Finally, he raises his hand for silence. He turns his cold, furious gaze upon Marcus Whitfield. "Mr. Whitfield," he says, his voice like the crack of a whip, "you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, bribery, and theft of federal property. Sheriff Barnes, you are also under arrest for accepting bribes and obstruction of justice." The crowd erupts in a deafening roar of cheers and applause. Families embrace, weeping with joy. For years they had lived in fear, and now finally justice had come to Silver Creek. Whitfield, cornered and desperate, makes one last pathetic attempt to discredit her. "She's a liar," he screams, his face contorted with hate. "She's nothing but an ugly reject her own family threw away. Why would you believe her over respected businessmen like us?" Judge Harrison's response silences the entire square and seals Whitfield's fate. He looks from Whitfield's sputtering rage to Odora's quiet, powerful dignity. "I believe evidence, Mr. Whitfield," the judge says, his voice booming with authority. "And the evidence before me proves that Mrs. Odora Montgomery possesses more intelligence, more courage, and more integrity than every man in your criminal organization combined. The woman they sent away as a joke had just, in a single, brilliant stroke, destroyed the most powerful criminal network in 4 territories. Her mind, the very thing her family had despised, had achieved what law enforcement had failed to do for 15 years. As 2 stunned but honest deputies lead Marcus Whitfield away in chains, the crowd surges forward, not with anger, but with gratitude. They don't cheer for the judge. They cheer for Odora, the quiet, practical woman who had saved them all. 6 months after the Harvest Festival that changed everything, Odora Montgomery stands at the front of the newly constructed Silver Creek schoolhouse. The morning sun streams through the large windows, illuminating the faces of 23 eager children. She is teaching them long division. The school was her idea, funded by the compensation money the county received after the federal investigation that followed her bombshell revelations. The investigation, spearheaded by the formidable Judge Harrison, had used Odora's evidence as its roadmap. Her documentation was so perfect, so thorough, that it led to swift and easy prosecutions, not just in Texas, but across 3 other territories. Corrupt officials were removed from office and imprisoned. Stolen land was returned to its rightful owners. The Continental Railroad was hit with massive fines, and its corrupt executives were indicted. Families who had been ruined received compensation, enough to rebuild their lives. Silver Creek was reborn. The Silver Creek Tribune, the local newspaper, had published a front-page story with a banner headline, "The Lady Who Saved Our County." The story was picked up by papers in other territories, and soon, Odora's name became synonymous with justice on the frontier. Letters began to arrive at the ranch, requests for assistance from other small communities, other towns, facing their own versions of Marcus Whitfield. Without intending to, Odora had created an entirely new profession for herself, a consulting detective specializing in financial crimes. Her business, which she runs with Lee's help, operates from the converted spare bedroom, the old war room. The maps are still on the wall, but now they are marked with red pins, each one indicating a successful prosecution, a community saved. The map is covered with red pins. Lee watches her from the doorway of the schoolhouse, his heart swelling with a pride so fierce it almost hurts. He sees the way the children look at her, with respect and admiration. She has transformed. The dismissed daughter, the family joke, has become the most respected and beloved woman in 3 counties. "Class dismissed," Odora announces with a warm smile. "Remember to practice your multiplication tables for tomorrow." The children file out, their chatter and laughter filling the air. Several of them stop to give her a quick hug or thank her for the lesson. A young girl, Mary Henderson, lingers behind. "Mrs. Montgomery," she says shyly, "my pa says you saved our farm." Adora kneels down to the girl's level. "Your father saved your farm, Mary," she says softly. "He saved it by having the courage to stand up and tell the truth. I just helped improve it." After Mary leaves, Adora walks out into the bright sunshine to find Lee waiting for her. In his hand, he holds a letter. The envelope is made of expensive paper, and the handwriting is instantly, unpleasantly familiar. "From Mississippi?" she asks, her voice flat. "Your mother." Odora takes the letter and opens it without any enthusiasm. Naomi's flowery, dramatic script covers 3 full pages. It is a masterpiece of desperate flattery and transparent manipulation. Her family, it seems, had read the newspaper articles. They had learned of her newfound fame and success, and now they wanted to reconcile. Naomi wrote about how they had always, secretly, believed in her potential, how they had missed her terribly. She suggested that it was time for Odora to come home, to help them manage their finances, which she claimed had miraculously recovered. But the real reason for the letter was buried in the final, panicked paragraph. Federal investigators, following the trail of corruption from Texas back to its roots, had paid them a visit. They were asking difficult questions about old business practices, about certain land deals. They needed her. They needed her expertise to navigate the legal storm that was about to break over their heads. "She wants you to come back and save them," Lee observes, reading the desperation between the lines over her shoulder. "Just like you always did." Odora looks at the letter, at the elegant lying words of the woman who had caused her so much pain. She feels nothing. No anger, no desire for revenge, just a calm, quiet emptiness. She walks over to the small pot-bellied stove in the schoolhouse, lifts the lid, and tosses the letter into the flames. She watches it curl, blacken, and turn to ash. That part of her life is over. That evening, as they are finishing dinner, there is a knock at the door. It's a delegation from the town. Samuel Henderson, Martha Patterson, James Williams, and a dozen other ranchers and their families. They are carrying a large cloth-wrapped object. "We, um, we wanted to give you something," Samuel Henderson says, his voice thick with emotion. They unwrap the object to reveal a beautiful hand-carved sign. It reads, "The Montgomery Ranch, home of our friend." Below the words is a small brass plaque. Engraved on it are the signatures of 67 families, every family whose life she had saved or improved. "We wanted you to know that you're not just respected here," Martha adds, her eyes shining. "You're loved." Odora looks at the sign, at the names, at the faces of the people gathered on her porch, and her eyes fill with tears. Not tears of sadness or pain, but of overwhelming gratitude. She had spent her entire life craving this, a sense of acceptance, of belonging, a family, and she had found it here, in the most unexpected of places, among people who valued character over appearance and substance over status. The next morning brings the final, perfect piece of vindication. A telegram arrives from the territorial capital in Washington. It announces that Marcus Whitfield, after a swift trial, has been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. His entire criminal network has been dismantled, root and branch. But it's the postscript at the end of the telegram that makes Odora's heart sing. "Investigations triggered by your evidence have exposed extensive related corruption in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. The Adabio family and their associates are facing federal indictment for fraud and racketeering. Significant fines and imprisonment are expected." The cruel joke had come full circle. It had become perfect justice. Lee finds her reading the telegram in their kitchen. Sunlight streams through the clean windows, falling on organized shelves and polished surfaces. Everything in the house reflects the order, peace, and purpose she has brought into their lives. "Any regrets?" he asked softly. "About what?" "Leaving your family behind, choosing this life over the one they planned for you." Odora looks around their modest, happy home. She thinks of the children she teaches every day. She thinks of the family she helped rebuild. She thinks of the community that has embraced her, completely and without reservation. "They didn't plan any life for me," she says, her voice quiet but certain. "They planned to be rid of me. the life I have now is the one I built for myself. Lee steps forward and kisses her forehead gently. And what a magnificent life it is. Outside their window, the community of Silver Creek bustles with honest commerce and genuine friendship. Families work their own land, free from the fear of mysterious debts or fraudulent claims. Children play in the streets, secure in the knowledge that their homes are safe. Odora Montgomery had been sent west as a joke, an object of scorn to be thrown away and forgotten. She had become the most valuable woman in the American territories. She had found love, respect, purpose, and a true family in the one place where she was finally seen for who she truly was. The woman everyone had dismissed as worthless had proven that the greatest value lies not in a pretty face, but in a brilliant mind and an unbreakable spirit. If you enjoyed this story of justice and unexpected triumph, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button for more tales you won't want to miss.